You've embarrassed this family long enough. You're leaving this house today, with or without that child.
The glass exploded across the marble floor before anyone had time to scream. Nyla Rowan staggered backward, one hand wrapped around her pregnant belly as the heavy silver picture frame crashed beside her feet. The framed family portrait shattered into glittering pieces, leaving the smiling faces of the powerful Mercer family buried beneath broken glass. You've embarrassed this family long enough, Odessa Mercer said, her voice as cold as polished steel. You're leaving this house today, with or without that child. Two security guards stood near the front doors, avoiding Nyla's eyes. Neither moved, neither spoke. The silence hurt more than the threat. Nyla looked around the enormous penthouse overlooking Manhattan. Only 6 months earlier, her husband had carried her through those same doors, laughing because she insisted she was too heavy to be lifted. He had promised that no matter how rich he became, home would always feel safe. Now the place felt like a prison. She swallowed hard. I won't leave without speaking to Kellen. Odessa smiled without warmth. My son is flying back from Singapore tomorrow. By then you'll be gone, and he'll finally understand that some mistakes are easier to erase before they're born. Nyla's knees weakened, not because she feared Odessa, because she knew Kellen believed his business trip would end in 2 more days. He had no idea what was happening inside his own home. Odessa stepped closer, until only inches separated them. You thought marrying a billionaire made you equal to us. I married your son because I loved him. Loved him? Odessa laughed. Women like you love opportunities. Nyla bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood. She refused to cry, not in front of the woman who had spent nearly a year trying to convince the world that she did not belong. When Kellen Mercer first met Nyla, she worked as a trauma nurse in a city hospital. He arrived after collapsing from exhaustion during a charity marathon. She had never heard his last name before. Another nurse whispered that the quiet patient was the youngest billionaire CEO in the country. It hadn't mattered. She treated him like every other patient. He remembered that. Months later, he found her volunteering at a neighborhood health clinic instead of attending a luxury gala held by his company. That was the moment he fell in love. Odessa never forgave either of them. To her, the Mercer name was a kingdom. Marriage was business. Love was weakness. Nyla represented everything she could never control. The wedding photograph still hung in the hallway. Odessa had tried to stop the ceremony. She failed. So she changed her strategy. Her attacks became quiet, small, constant. Every breakfast came with criticism. Every dinner included a comparison between Nyla and wealthy women Kellen could have married. Every charity event ended with Odessa introducing Nyla as the girl from the public hospital. Guests laughed politely. Nyla smiled politely. Then she cried alone. She never told Kellen. He was rebuilding Mercer Technologies after his father's sudden death. Thousands of employees depended on him. Investors watched every decision. She refused to become another burden. Then the pregnancy changed everything. Instead of softening, Odessa became crueler. She questioned every doctor's appointment. She accused Nyla of trapping Kellen with a baby. She quietly dismissed 2 housekeepers who had shown Nyla kindness. Soon the penthouse became unbearably lonely. Only one person still treated Nyla like family. Elias. The elderly chauffeur had driven 3 generations of Mercers. He secretly brought Nyla fresh fruit whenever morning sickness left her unable to eat. He reminded her to rest. He listened without judging. Earlier that morning, he had whispered something strange before leaving for the airport. Be careful today, Mrs. Mercer. Some storms don't come from the sky. She finally understood what he meant. Odessa pointed toward the elevator. Take your suitcase. I haven't packed. I packed for you. One guard rolled a small suitcase across the polished floor. Nyla stared at it. Inside were only a few dresses, a toothbrush, her prenatal vitamins, nothing else. Not even the tiny knitted baby blanket she had spent weeks making with her own hands. Odessa noticed her searching. The nursery has already been cleared. The words hit harder than any slap. My baby's room? It never suited a Mercer heir. Nyla rushed toward the hallway. Odessa grabbed her arm. You'll do no such thing. Nyla pulled free and hurried into the nursery. She froze. The pale green walls had been painted over. The rocking chair Kellen restored before leaving overseas was gone. The shelves where tiny books once waited stood completely empty. Only faint marks on the carpet proved furniture had ever existed. Someone had erased every sign that her child was expected. Her breathing became uneven. This wasn't yours to destroy. It belonged to this family. It belonged to my baby. No, Odessa answered. Not if that child never enters this house. The room began spinning. Nyla leaned against the wall. Her vision blurred. A sharp pain spread across her stomach. She reached instinctively for support. Odessa frowned, but not with concern. Don't perform for me. Another wave of pain forced Nyla to bend over. One guard shifted nervously. Mrs. Mercer, maybe we should call a doctor. Odessa silenced him with one glance. She's pretending. Nyla dropped to one knee. A small gasp escaped her lips. The guard took one uncertain step forward. Odessa blocked his path. If either of you disobeys me today, neither of you will work for this family again. Fear settled over the room. The guards remained frozen. Nyla realized she was completely alone. She reached into her pocket with trembling fingers and pulled out her phone. No signal. Odessa calmly held up a small electronic device. I had the wireless network disabled an hour ago. You planned this. I planned to protect my son's future. Tears finally spilled down Nyla's face. Not because of herself, because the child inside her deserved better than this. Far below, city traffic moved as though nothing terrible was happening. People laughed. Taxi horns echoed through the streets. Life continued. No one knew a mother was begging for the chance to keep her unborn baby safe. Odessa nodded toward the elevator once more. You have 1 minute. Then the private elevator chimed. Everyone turned. Odessa smiled confidently. Perfect timing. That must be my attorney. The elevator doors slid open. Instead of a lawyer, Elias stepped out, breathing hard. Behind him stood a tall man in a charcoal overcoat, carrying a single travel bag. Odessa's smile disappeared. Kellen? The billionaire CEO lowered his suitcase without saying a word. His eyes moved slowly across the shattered nursery, then to the tears on Nyla's face, then to the security guards, finally to his mother. Nobody spoke. The silence became unbearable. Kellen noticed the empty corner where the rocking chair had once stood. He remembered sanding every rough edge with his own hands because Nyla wanted their baby to have something built with love instead of money. Now it was gone. He looked at Nyla again. She was trembling. One hand covered her stomach. The other reached toward him without saying a word. He had seen fear before. He had negotiated with ruthless competitors. He had faced financial disasters worth billions. But he had never seen that look in his wife's eyes. It broke something inside him. Just before the truth exploded, imagine what secret could make a mother destroy her own son's family. While you're thinking about it, take a second to subscribe, leave a like, and tell us what country you're watching from in the comments. Your support helps stories like this reach people all over the world. Kellen stepped forward until he stood between Nyla and Odessa. His voice was quiet, too quiet. Someone, he said, is going to explain exactly what happened in my home. Kellen did not raise his voice. That frightened everyone in the room, far more than shouting ever could. His eyes settled on each face, one after another, lingering just long enough for every person to feel the weight of his silence. The security guards lowered their heads. Elias stood near the elevator, breathing heavily after rushing back from the airport. Odessa remained perfectly still, refusing to look away. Nyla tried to step toward her husband, but another sharp pain forced her to stop. Kellen caught her before she could lose her balance. You're shaking, he whispered. I'm all right. No, you're not. He slipped off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. Then he looked toward one of the guards. Call Dr. Hensley. Now. The guard hesitated. His eyes drifted toward Odessa. That single glance answered a question Kellen had never thought to ask. His employees had stopped taking orders from him inside his own home. I gave you an instruction, Kellen said quietly. The guard quickly reached for his phone. Odessa folded her arms. Must we create unnecessary drama? She's simply emotional. Kellen slowly turned to face his mother. Emotional? You've always been too soft where she's concerned. No, he replied. I haven't been present enough. Those words surprised even Nyla. She looked at him, seeing something she had not seen in months. Regret. Real regret. He noticed the faint bruise near her wrist. His expression changed. Who grabbed your arm? No one answered. I asked a question. Odessa spoke without hesitation. I did. The room became silent again. You? I was preventing another one of her little performances. Kellen looked at Nyla's wrist, then back at his mother. You laid your hands on my wife. I corrected a situation before it became an embarrassment. She's carrying my child. Odessa's face hardened. That remains to be seen. Nyla stared at her. So that's what this has really been about. Odessa didn't deny it. Instead, she walked toward the massive windows overlooking the city. When powerful families survive for generations, they survive because they ask difficult questions. Kellen frowned. What questions? The kind weak people are afraid to ask. She turned slowly. How certain are you that the baby is yours? The words landed like a hammer. Elias closed his eyes. The guards looked horrified. Nyla seemed unable to breathe. Kellen didn't speak. He simply looked at his wife. She met his eyes without fear, without guilt, without hesitation. I have never betrayed you. He believed her immediately, not because of emotion, because he knew her. Yet one question lingered. Why would his mother suddenly make such an accusation? She wasn't reckless. She planned everything, which meant she believed she had something. Kellen's phone vibrated. His assistant. He ignored it. It rang again, then again. Finally, he answered. What? The voice on the other end sounded panicked. Sir, there's a problem at headquarters. What kind of problem? The board has called an emergency meeting. I never approved one. They say they no longer need your approval. Kellen's expression darkened. Who says that? 3 board members have voted to suspend your authority until questions surrounding your family are resolved. He felt the room shift around him. Family, not business. Someone had connected the two. Someone wanted both. He ended the call. Odessa noticed the change in his face. So, she said softly, it has begun. You knew. I know many things. What have you done? I protected what your father spent 40 years building. Kellen realized something terrifying. This wasn't about Nyla anymore. It was about control. Someone was using his marriage to remove him as CEO. Elias stepped closer. Sir, may I speak freely? You always can. I overheard 2 board members talking yesterday. What did they say? They mentioned that once your reputation collapsed, Mercer Global would finally return to experienced hands. Kellen looked toward his mother. She didn't even flinch. You've been meeting with them. I've been speaking with responsible people. You've been planning against me. I've been saving this company from your emotions. Nyla suddenly remembered something. The envelope. Kellen turned. What envelope? She hurried toward the bedroom despite the discomfort. A few moments later, she returned, holding a sealed brown envelope hidden beneath folded sweaters. I found this 3 weeks ago in your father's old study. You never mentioned it. I thought it was business paperwork. Kellen opened it carefully. Inside were copies of financial transfers, private contracts, confidential correspondence. Every page connected the same names, board members, outside investors, and one familiar signature, Odessa Mercer. The documents revealed secret agreements made months before Kellen's father died. Agreements transferring enormous voting power away from Kellen. He looked at the dates. This started before Dad got sick. Odessa remained calm. Business requires preparation. You were planning to remove me before I even became CEO. You were never ready. Nyla watched the realization spread across her husband's face. Everything he believed about his family was cracking apart. Not because strangers betrayed him, because his own mother never intended for him to lead. She had simply waited for the perfect excuse. The pregnancy, the marriage, the rumors. Everything had become part of a larger game. A knock interrupted the silence. Dr. Hensley entered, carrying his medical bag. He hurried toward Nyla. Let's make sure the baby's all right. After several tense minutes, he smiled gently. The baby's heartbeat is strong. Relief filled the room. Then his expression became serious. But stress like this cannot continue. Kellen nodded. It won't. The doctor packed away his equipment. Before leaving, he paused. There is one thing, however. Everyone looked at him. I received 3 separate phone calls this week, asking me to release Mrs. Mercer's confidential medical records. Kellen frowned. Who called? They refused to identify themselves. Were the requests legal? Not remotely. Did you refuse? Immediately. The doctor looked directly at Odessa, but one caller claimed to be acting with authorization from a member of the Mercer family. Odessa's face remained unreadable. Kellen's hands slowly formed fists. Someone hadn't merely tried to humiliate Nyla. Someone had tried to obtain private medical information. Why? What were they hoping to find or manufacture? The answer remained hidden, for now. Sometimes the biggest betrayals begin with one small lie that nobody questions. Before this mystery grows even darker, take a moment to subscribe, like this video. Now, let's uncover the truth. Just then, Elias's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His face turned pale. "Sir, what is it? The news channels?" He swallowed hard. "They're reporting that Mercer Global's CEO may be raising another man's child." Every eye in the room turned toward the giant television, mounted across the penthouse wall. The broadcast had already begun, and someone, somewhere, had made sure the entire world was watching. The cameras outside Mercer Global flashed like lightning as reporters shouted questions from every direction. Nyla stepped out of the car beside Kellen. Only 24 hours earlier, she had wanted nothing more than to disappear. Now she lifted her head. She refused to hide. Every screen in the country had repeated the same lie. The billionaire's pregnant wife had been unfaithful. Anonymous sources claimed the child was not Kellen's. Commentators argued over rumors as though they were facts. Strangers judged a woman they had never met. Yet Nyla's face remained calm. She had stopped fearing people who built their confidence on someone else's pain. Inside the headquarters, hundreds of employees filled the grand auditorium. Board members occupied the front row. Investors watched through live video feeds. The emergency meeting had become a public spectacle. Kellen walked directly to the stage. No prepared speech, no teleprompter, only the truth. He looked across the room. "I was told this meeting was about protecting Mercer Global." His eyes settled on the directors. "But today, I discovered it was never about protecting the company." Silence spread through the hall. It was about stealing it. Several board members shifted uneasily. One of them, Victor Hale, slowly stood. "Those are serious accusations." "They are. Can you prove them?" Instead of answering, Kellen nodded toward the side entrance. The doors opened. Elias entered carrying several locked archive boxes. Behind him walked the company's chief compliance officer and two independent forensic auditors. Victor's confidence faded. Kellen held up the contracts Nyla had discovered. "My father kept copies of everything." The giant screen behind him lit up. Page after page appeared before the audience. Secret voting agreements, hidden financial transfers, private emails. Every document carried dates stretching back years. The room erupted. Journalists hurried to photograph the evidence. Several investors immediately reached for their phones. Victor tried to interrupt. "Those documents don't prove intent." "No," Kellen answered calmly. "So let's hear from someone who can." Another door opened. An elderly woman stepped inside using a cane. Nearly everyone recognized her. Judge Miriam Sloan. She had chaired the Independent Family Trust for over 20 years. She approached the stage without hesitation. "I was asked to remain silent until these records became necessary." She looked directly at Victor. "And today, they are." The auditorium fell completely quiet. She removed another sealed envelope. Before his passing, Charles Mercer amended the trust. Kellen stared. "My father never mentioned another amendment. He feared someone inside the family would attempt exactly what has happened." Judge Sloan unfolded the final document. "Control of Mercer Global cannot pass to any board faction through manufactured scandal, family coercion, or false allegations." Gasps echoed through the room. She continued reading. "If evidence shows any individual intentionally fabricated claims against a member of the Mercer family to seize corporate control, that individual permanently forfeits every voting privilege attached to the Mercer Trust." Victor's face turned white. Several directors immediately looked away from him. Then Judge Sloan spoke the sentence that changed everything. "The investigation determined that the false pregnancy allegations originated from anonymous accounts financed through shell companies controlled by Victor Hale." The room exploded with disbelief. Reporters rushed toward the exits to file breaking news. Victor pointed toward Odessa. She agreed to this. Odessa's expression finally cracked. "You promised no one would trace the payments." Victor laughed bitterly. "You promised your son would resign." The confession echoed through every microphone in the hall. Kellen closed his eyes for only a moment. The greatest betrayal had never been the rumor. It had been the willingness of people closest to him to destroy innocent lives for power. Security officers entered. Victor attempted to leave. He never reached the door. Neither did two other directors implicated in the conspiracy. As officers escorted them away, every camera remained fixed on Odessa. She sat perfectly still. The woman who had ruled every room for decades suddenly looked very small. She finally looked at Nyla, not with anger, not with pride, with defeat. "I only wanted to protect what your father built." Kellen answered before Nyla could speak. "No." He shook his head slowly. "You wanted control." Judge Sloan turned another page. "There is one final matter." Everyone looked back. Charles Mercer left a private letter to be opened, only if this family was divided by greed. She handed it to Kellen. His hands trembled as he unfolded the handwritten pages. "My son, if you are reading this, someone has mistaken wealth for love. Remember something I learned too late. Buildings can be inherited. Character cannot. Choose the person who protects your peace, not the people who protect your fortune." Kellen could barely continue. "If your wife stands beside you through storms created by money, never let money come between you." He lowered the letter. His father had known. Long before anyone else. He stepped down from the stage. The cameras followed. He walked directly toward Nyla, without caring about the reporters, without caring about shareholders, without caring about headlines. He knelt in front of his wife. "I'm sorry." She gently lifted him to his feet. "You came back. I should never have left you to fight alone. You came back. That was enough." The audience watched in silence as they embraced. Not because they were billionaires, because they looked like two ordinary people, choosing each other after surviving extraordinary pain. 3 months later, the courthouse announced criminal charges against Victor Hale and the directors who had participated in the conspiracy. Mercer Global recovered faster than analysts believed possible. Employees later admitted that trust inside the company had become stronger because integrity had finally mattered more than influence. Kellen declined another term as sole CEO. Instead, he rebuilt the executive leadership around transparency and independent oversight. People questioned why he would willingly surrender so much authority. His answer never changed. No company survives if one person's pride becomes more valuable than the truth. Nyla returned to medicine, not because she needed the income, because healing people reminded her who she had always been before wealth complicated everything. She also founded a foundation providing legal and emotional support for women who experienced family abuse behind closed doors. Thousands found help. Many of them said the hardest part had never been the cruelty. It had been believing nobody would believe them. Nyla made sure they were heard. Months later, she gave birth to a healthy daughter. When Kellen placed the tiny baby in her arms, he smiled through tears. What should we teach her first? Nyla looked down at the sleeping child. That no family name is bigger than her worth. Outside the hospital, reporters waited for another dramatic headline. Instead, they watched a husband carrying flowers, a mother carrying hope, and a little girl beginning life in a family that had finally learned the difference between power and love. Some victories are not measured by wealth, revenge, or status. They are measured by the moment someone who was once silenced discovers they no longer need anyone's permission to stand tall. If this story moved you, please subscribe, like this video, because no matter how dark betrayal becomes, kindness is never weakness. The people who choose compassion over cruelty leave the strongest legacy. Protect those who love you, stand up for what is right, and never let anyone convince you that your worth depends on their approval. Stay inspired, stay kind, and keep believing in better days.